record. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is Writers Read returning in September 2021. And I'm absolutely thrilled that tonight we have the beautiful and eloquent and articulate academic Lesley Traynor. couldn't resist throwing that one in.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're going to describe the male participant beautiful as well.
I am going to describe Matthew as, what can I say, Matthew? I mean, you know, this handsome, erudite, wonderful young man has agreed to join us. So thank you so much, to both of you. Yeah. So Philip, who's all the way over in Virginia, introduced me to Matthew through online connections. I had the privilege of meeting Lesley through Ian, through one of the writing workshops that Ian put on, and I have to tell you, Lesley, your words have never left me, so that's maybe why I signed up for the MLit. So
good. Yeah,
that was an amazing workshop. So we have so Philip, do you want to say about being on with us before we get going, and then Molly, and then Ian, I'll get you to introduce yourself, and then we'll actually start.
Hello.
Hi, Philip.
I'm Philip in Virginia, United States, and yeah, I'm a big avid reader. So yeah, book clubs and getting to meet people from all around the world, and really, this, I guess, one of the best things with COVID, I guess, is had me reading a lot more than normal. So so yeah, I got introduced to a lot of new books and authors and things I might not have read before that I did. And Matthew's book, Beyond the Pale, which I was lucky enough to have a copy of, and I really enjoyed it a lot. So I look forward to hearing the writer read his own words. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip. Molly, welcome. Molly's also a writer of children's stories. But do you want to just introduce yourself quickly, Molly?
Hi, I write children's books, but I'm really interested to meet other authors too.
Brilliant. Thank you for joining us. And Ian, what can I say? You're eclectic. You're so talented, Ian. You don't fit into one box.
My box is overflowing. Oh, that didn't sound right. Well, anyway, yeah, does that make me a jack of all trades, master of none? Probably. Am I worried? Nah. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I was going to say in my intro, I'm picking up on what you said about the MLit and Lesley's workshop. If I'm not Lesley's #1 fan, I probably ought to be. I'm not going to be kidnapping or anything in prisoner, or, you know, that'll not happen, that's okay. But I'm definitely a huge fan of these workshops that Lesley does. And hopefully at some point we will coerce, we will talk her sweetly into doing another one for us, because they're always absolutely wonderful. And Matthew, I don't know anything about you, so it's going to be a voyage of discovery, so that'll be fun. Excellent. I'll shut up now.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Thank you. Okay, so Matthew, over to you. I'm really looking forward to hearing you read your words. When Philip introduced you via, you know, sort of online chat, my first thought was, and I don't know if you've ever read this book, and I may be completely off, was the monk who sold the Ferrari. Right. Okay. So anyway, but Lesley has read your book, and you're on my TV Red pile, and I apologize for that. But please tell us what inspired you.
Well, first of all, thank you ever so much for having me here. So I'm really excited to be speaking to you all. I'm Matthew, a writer here in Yorkshire, and yeah, it's been a very strange couple of years. But if there's one thing it's brought, it's that, I suppose, it's allowed the creative juices to work in a slightly different way. And in and around all this, it allowed me to finish my latest book, Beyond the Pale, which Liza so lovingly introduced. And yes, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari is one I read a few years ago as I was starting to dive into the possibility of, could I write a book like that? I always had this hope of combining these two passions of mine, of writing fiction and non-fiction together into one. And I never really believed that it would be possible. But then I just saw and came across more and more books that kind of created these sort of allegories or fables or parables. And I also, I suppose, just started to come up with the idea of what would eventually become Beyond the Pale. Until then, I wrote fiction as just like my therapy more than anything else. And it was just my art form. It was a way for me to express myself. My non-fiction was more surrounded by client work. It's what I did as my job. And I enjoyed them both equally, but I just never liked the idea that they were so different and separated. Mm-hmm. So Beyond the Pale has been a fantastic journey for me personally, because it's allowed me to bring these two worlds together. And yes, it is a fable, kind of business-centered one very much focused on entrepreneurial mindset people and people who have businesses or work for themselves. But, well, at least it started that way. I think as I began to write it and edit it and rewrite it, and we have some writers here, so you know the process far well enough, I realized that a lot of the things which go on in the book, although they might be sort of spun with a business head, they're just things that we all go through, whether you have a 9-to-5 job, whether you're young and have yet to get into the working world, whether you're older and you're kind of left that side of things. We all kind of have the kind of questions and worries and self-doubts that get touched upon in the book. So yeah, it's weird. It kind of began life as a business fable, but it's one that I think has just sort of spawned the more sort of general population, which is fantastic to hear for me personally, because you never quite know what people are going to get from a book until it gets out there and you start getting the feedback. And people like Philip have been kind enough to read it and share their thoughts. And yeah, there's nothing quite like it, as I'm sure a few people on this call know.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, I'm really excited to hear you read from your book. If you wouldn't mind sharing some of your words with us.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of little snippets here. I think the first one's only like 2 pages, and then the next one is maybe 3 or 4. So I don't know if you want me to kind of stop, and if anyone has any questions after the first one, I can. Otherwise,
yeah, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Well, this first one is at the start of chapter 7, and it's at the lead character's Ferdinand's house in San Francisco. So I won't give too much away, because I suppose it's difficult when you're, I don't want to spoil it, but also it's kind of difficult. I'm bringing out snippets which have been, like, you'll have gone through the journey if you've read it up until this point, but this kind of comes after a big interview discussion that Ferdinand had with someone, which kind of really opened his eyes and forced him to think about things and to question the way he's been living life. And this is like the evening after all of this. So his head's a bit all over the shop, and hopefully that kind of comes through. So without further ado, I will read. I stare at the TV as faces flash up and vanish, one channel flicking to the next before I'm able to decide what show is what. I stare, taking in nothing but the blurred colours, my thumb numb from pressing the same button for so long. I don't like TV. Never have, not even as a kid. I prefer to read or lose myself in the computer screen rather than waste away in front of stories and conversations that held little significance in my life. Despite this, I have a TV, a huge one. I recall the person who delivered it maybe 5 months ago. Top of the range set, apparently. It has all the latest features a TV fanatic could ask for. I can't remember what it cost. $3,000-$4,000, maybe more. I haven't sat here and watched it in more than 3 or 4 times. This house is full of empty and meaningless desires like that. Only, am I the one who desires them? This couch is too white and leathery for my liking. Yet I not only bought it, but paid more than 10 grand for it. And there's the coffee table my feet rest on, a huge chunk of wood that cost more than my parents' first family car, the same car that drove me to school and football practice, to this place and that. There's more technology in this house than I imagine many schools have access to. I can speak at a demand in any room and have lights turned up, temperature turned down, and the oven switched on while I have drinks across town. Not that I've ever used the oven. I have it all. The latest specs, the hottest trends, and the most sophisticated solutions. And yet I use so little of it, so little of the time. It all just exists. And after this afternoon, I'm beginning to wonder if maybe I too just exist. I halt the flickering screen and turn it to black, tossing the remote out of reach. I sigh, observing the room as the air slowly departs my lungs. A wall of glass separating me from the dark outside world of San Fran. A palm tree springing up out of a shiny grey floor, hanging over the stairs that led up to a colourful bookcase full of books I have not read. A flawless, sparkling, clean kitchen to my left that I don't recall ever cooking in. And all around me, obscenely patterned cushions I did not choose and do not like. I own this house and everything in it. But is it my home? When I think of home, I picture my parents and the house I grew up in. But I haven't lived there for almost a decade. I've lived here for 4 years, yet spent so little time within these walls. I don't stay in and watch TV or read, and I never sit on this couch and enjoy the view. I post pictures of this impressive place and share it with the world, and I invite people to stay with me and enjoy the unnecessary comforts. Then we spend all our time out and about, enjoying further necessary comforts which a city like San Francisco offers. I never do this, sit here doing nothing. I never just think for the sake of thinking, for the chance to explore what's actually on my mind. Yesterday, I woke up satisfied and confident about the journey ahead. I awoke an entrepreneur with purpose, a CEO with a vision, and a man with the wealth, talent, and ambition to achieve everything. Some 30 hours later, as the dark closes in for another night, a heavy, sad, and numbing rumble consumes me. Jordan, in less than an hour, broke me. Becky left me. I don't feel like me. I pick up my phone and bring it to life, the home screen once again, notifying me of all the messages, calls, and notifications I've missed. I'm wanted, in demand, and needed by so many. Yet I've spent all evening wondering if this is true, or if it's my own feeling of self-importance. I want it to be true. I want to believe it is. I am sure it is, but only. And I will leave the first little reading at that.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I'll let anybody else make a comment, but I'm sitting here feeling really moved at that inner journey. That you know, it was really, I found it very moving. Just that being in that sense of I have everything, but I am isolated. I'm lost.
Yeah, and that's Ferdinand in a nutshell. I mean, he's very rich, young, wealthy, good looking, just on the outside looking in, everyone assumes he is the guy with it all, the kind of person I imagine many people, at least those who are kind of in the business world looking to build something, they aspire to be like him. I imagine right now you can probably picture someone like that, especially in the sort of digital world, who seems to have it all, on the fast track to being a billionaire and just, yeah, having everything you could possibly want in life. And up until the previous day, he assumed he was just doing what he needed to do. But now he's starting to wonder whether he is as happy as he thought he was. He's starting to realize he has been self-sabotaging more than he ever could have realized. And again, I think to some degree, I tried to create a character that few of us can really relate to because he's so rich and wealthy, it just has it all. Yet then we realize how close to a person like that we are, because he has the same kind of insecurities and self-doubts, and he does the same form of distraction and procrastination and self-sabotage that most of us do in everyday life.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions or any comments they want to make to Matthew, or do you want to wait for the next bit of next reading that he does?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Right. When I was starting to read the book, strangely enough, I started to see parallels to perhaps my career. I was head of a chemistry department, and working crazy hours. People don't expect that. It was in education, so people don't maybe expect that, but that's reality. And the more hours I put in, the more seemed to be expected. It really became, you know, just soul destroying. And stepping away from that was incredibly dangerous because everything that came with it, and there was parallels with your character, you know, to step away from that, you know, the salary, I suppose, you know, the status, you know, and all the ramifications around that. So I suppose really that was the point. You know, you're writing about somebody in the finance world, but I'm sure there are others, you know, other professions, you know, would maybe have felt like that as well, you know, and it is that realization point. But sorry, I know I'm rambling on, but there was something else, is that it seemed to be that the profession in his case is almost set up to perpetuate that. You know, that is what you do. You know, you strive, you know, even the social life is also part of the work. And I worked for the government, and rather than being able to walk out the office at 5 o'clock, I was expected to go to a bar till about 9 o'clock, you know, and that seemed to be coming every night, you know, because that was expected. So, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you, Lesley.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's true. He's the face of the company, and he talks about it a lot earlier in the book. Like, part of his job is to go to, you know, these networking events and these little dining experiences, and to be the face of the company and to be out there and to be growing a social media presence. And it's not to say that anything is right or wrong. You have to give anything context, but I think most of us are probably guilty that we can get so consumed by life, whether that's something in our personal life, whether it's work, whether it's a blend of just anything and everything. We get so consumed by what's around us that we start to dilute ourselves, and we also start to lose sight of, I suppose, the purpose. So in Ferdinand's case, he built a company, he had a vision, it had a purpose, he wanted to change the world. And over the past 4, 5, 6 years, whatever it will have been, he started to lose sight of that because the expectations, the pressure just took over, and he just had to wear this mask until it became his face.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I ask,
go ahead.
Yes. Just quickly, why you chose to set it in America?
Basically because a lot of my client work over the years has been in America, and I wanted it to be a pretty out there-ish kind of like typical Silicon Valley type story. So just having it as an American character, having it set in Silicon Valley just seemed like it would be easier to be more universal rather than if it was set somewhere else. And like I say, I've done so much writing and ghostwriting for American clients over the last few years. I've always found it quite interesting where I can wear an American hat at times. So yeah, hopefully that answers that.
Thank you. That's cute. It must be an interesting juxtaposition for you too.
Yeah, it can be tricky. I'm getting better with the spellings.
Yes.
Who I'm speaking to, I can, yeah, exactly. I'm getting better. It's taken a few years, but yeah, it was a good challenge because up until then, I've had American characters in my book, in my previous books, but up until then, I've always had like the main characters that've been Brits. So this was like an interesting new challenge for me. And it seemed quite organic and evolutionary because, like I said, a lot of my client work in recent years, for the last 4 or 5 years, has been very much North American.
Thank you. Okay. Right, let's go to your second reading, Matthew, if that's all right.
Yes. So this is chapter 19, and it's set in Koh Rong in Cambodia. And it's when he's well on his journey now, he's kind of taken his sabbatical, he's met quite a few people. He's definitely not asking the right questions. He's definitely far from having the answers he would like, but he started to strip away the various layers and getting closer and closer, meeting some very inspirational people, and yeah, trying to let it all come in. So
Thank you.
I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. I whisper the words under hushed breaths as though I'm fearful to let them out, let them be real. I keep trying to say the words in my head, to believe them, as Kamal suggested. I've read about his strange form of meditation in his book. Look in a mirror and say the words out loud. Look yourself in the eye and stare, to feel the words until you believe them. I love you. I love you. I love you. It works for me, he said, but I don't know if it will work for you. You need to figure it out, find something that does. I love you. I love you. I love you. Eyes closed, I slow my breathing and hang on to each breath. The fresh sea air flows in. The salt tingles against my throat and up my nose. It tickles but is pleasant. The sun begins its descent, the soothing heat warm against my face. The ocean is out there beyond my eyelids. I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. My mind keeps wandering. I try to bring it back to those words, to believe them. I want to. I feel like I need to, but I'm not sure I do. Each time I say them, it feels like there's a voice deep within saying, no, no, you don't. You can't. I love you. I love you. I love you. Kamal had returned to our hut earlier. Leave me alone at the bar. Just enjoy the sunset, he said. Soak it in. Be with yourself. I've stepped away from the bar and slumped into the sand, mere meters away. I'm alone, but barely. It's like I don't trust myself enough to venture too far down the beach. I'm on it, but only just. I love you. I love you. I sigh. I love you. I allow the light in. It stings my eyes as I cup my hands and bring grains of sand to my nose, still warm as it slides through my fingertips, glistening in the fading light. Hey, says a voice. It's a beautiful sunset this evening. I arch my neck and watch her sit down beside me, the woman with the words, I trust you, across her chest. Hi, I say. She says nothing, takes a deep breath and runs her fingers through the sand. I love this time of day. I look toward the horizon, a canvas of orange and blue. I'm Ginny, by the way. Ferdinand. I know, I saw you do a talk once in New York. Oh, she smiles. It was good. Thanks. Is that why you're here, speaking? No, I say, taking some time away, clearing the head. That's good. I imagine the life of a billionaire is pretty intense. I shrug. If you want to be on your own, no, I say, sorry, just had a lot on my mind. Anyway, I'm not very good at it. At what? Being on your own? I shrug again, this time with a smile. I feel you. I didn't used to be either. Always had to be around people. Not anymore. Well, I'm definitely a people person, but I also love to spend time with myself. That's what I struggle with, I say. It can be hard, especially if you're used to being around people all the time. Yeah. So what's with the t-shirt? I noticed it earlier, I say, eager to change the subject. She pinches each shoulder and pulls it back into position. It's my way of showing people I trust them. Isn't that a little dangerous these days? Why? Because there are a lot of bad people, especially for a woman in a country like this one. Yeah, I nod. Have you met any? She asks. What do you mean? How many rapists and murderers have you met? She repeats. I smile. I can't say I have, at least, not that I know of. She winks. That's why I choose to trust people. I know there are bad people in the world, but I find it sad how our default setting is to not trust anyone. that they have to earn it before we let them in. Shouldn't it be the other way around? I can't say I've ever thought about it like that. That's why I wear the shirt, to encourage you to. She places her hand on my thigh, looks me in the eye. How does this make you feel? Honestly, I say, a little tense. Why? Because you have your hand on my leg and you're staring at me. We've only just met. Why is that a problem? It's a little intense, don't you think? Why? I don't know, it just is. She laughs, removes her hand and glides it into the sand. Touching someone is a sign of affection. And eye contact is a sign of trust and love. Why are they bad things? They're not. I'm just not used to strangers coming up to me and invading my personal space. Exactly, she says. Nobody's used to it anymore. We bump into someone on the street and say sorry. We see someone who looks different from us and wonder what's wrong with them. We meet someone new, and instead of wondering what makes them beautiful, we look for signs of imperfection. There's no trust. I guess it's human nature to be wary of one another. Really? She smiles again. The ancient Greeks didn't agree with you. Oh, is that so? She nods. The story goes that humans originally had 4 arms, 4 legs, and a single head made of 2 faces. We were powerful in this state. So much so that the gods felt threatened. They were worried we would overthrow them or not need them, so Zeus decided to punish us. He split us in half, she says, swiping her hand across her chest. We were no longer whole, rather miserable, and we refused to eat or survive to survive, or fight to survive. So Apollo decided to have us sewn back together, but still no longer whole. Either male or female, not both. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 face. We had our other half taken from us. And the story says that we spent eternity since searching for the yin to our yang. She straightens her posture and looks out to the sea. This is actually where the notion of having a soulmate was born. Out there somewhere is our other half. Without knowing it, we yearn for them. She grabs my leg again, gently clasps it, deep down. Everyone struggles to be on their own. It isn't natural. As a baby, you wanted someone around you. Each time they left the room, you felt abandoned. You worried they might never return. I'm not sure that fear ever fades.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. I was talking to a friend the other day. She's an artist, and we were actually sort of talking about the whole concept of when you meet someone that I feel really uncomfortable when I go on networking or things events because I don't do small talk. So she was saying the same, and I was just thinking that, you know, how uncomfortable it is for somebody who all they do is hide behind the mask of small talk. You know, to have somebody ask them a question, but what do you really think? You know, don't tell me you're fine. Tell me how you really are, right? The hand on the leg or the eye contact. Yeah, beautifully described. Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody else like to make some comments, or have you have any questions for Matthew?
I'd like to say it's a really nice journey that the character goes through, and there's lots of nice little tidbits of wisdom in there that I enjoyed, and not that I want to spoil it for anybody, but ask Matthew, how about Beyond the Horizon? Is there a continuation of Ferdinand and his story?
Yeah, absolutely. So to give a very brief answer, the book, the journey he goes on is like through 3 phases: awakening, ascension, and evolution. So awakening is this idea of you know what you know, and then something comes along, sparks you into realizing and questioning yourself and going in search of something better. The ascension is the tough bit. It's the climbing up the mountain, getting your hands dirty, making mistakes, trying to figure out what the right questions to ask are, and then coming up with an answer. And at the other end is evolution, which so often just leads to a new awakening, and so on and so on. And I think growth in life as a whole is rather sort of cyclical like that. So he goes through these 3 phases in Beyond Pale as the first book. but it's going to be a trilogy where each book then kind of represents its own. So this one in the trilogy is his awakening, and then Beyond the Horizon is going to be more his ascension. There'll still be the 3 phases within that awakening, because the end of the book kind of is a new awakening for him. So he'll go through the awakening, ascension, and evolution in book 2, as he will in book 3. But book 2 for the trilogy is like his ascension. So he is going to start asking the right questions. He's going to go start in search of the right answers, and he's going to get his hands dirty, and he's going to do things which he never probably thought he would ever do, and learn things he never even knew about before the fact. So yeah, I've just literally this last week gone away on a little trip, and I've started to allow my mind to allow some ideas to marinate, so I can start structuring everything towards the end of the year.
Okay.
Oh, and happy belated birthday, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. Did anybody else have a question or want to make any comment? I'm just aware of the time, and I want to move on to Lesley, but I also don't want to shortchange, because I've just loved what you've shared with us, Matthew. And Matthew did put in the chat where you can buy his book. So if you click on the chat, but I'll also share those links later when I put this out.
Yeah, and if anyone does have any questions that they'd like to send, if you go to beyondbook.co, there's a link to my Facebook and Instagram and things like that. Just send me a DM or a message or an email, and happy to answer.
Brilliant.
If you prefer more one-on-one type thing.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so Ms. Lesley Traynor, thank you so much for joining us again. Sorry, I'm just that wasn't supposed to happen. So Lesley, tell us about your journey as a writer, please.
I was thinking about this, how early or how young I was when I first started really writing. And I think what the earliest I can remember is, believe it or not, writing lyrics for a friend who was a musician, and I might have been about 14, and actually have an old jotter with them all written down. So that's the earliest, I think, but I was writing before that, but that seemed to be quite, the first time I'd written a lot of stuff down for somebody else. And then I suppose life took over, and I didn't really formally write anything for years, absolutely years. And it was in 2000, might have been a wee bit before 2000, I went off and did a year at Strathclyde University in creative writing, and wrote a novel. And that's not what you do on writing courses. You write short stories because that's all they really want. And I found it incredibly frustrating because I just wanted to write novels. And Matthew, I actually wrote the novel to Eminem with the music pounding in my head. I had to have this all the time. And considering that the novel was based in St. Petersburg, it's a bit weird, but it seemed to fit the mood because it was kind of half espionage, sort of half romantic. Anyway, and then that was it. I just couldn't stop writing. But I joined a lot of writing groups. I believe in writing with others at times, just to push yourself. And I still do that. I meet with 3 other writers. We have been doing this for years, and we bring work in progress and we critique. It's amazing the work that comes out of that. But I've written a series of novels now. They've been out a number of years. They're urban fantasy, so completely different from the first one. And I suppose really for the last 5 years, I've been writing a lot of short stories and poetry. So, and in between that, I've done the Masters at Stirling, which was crazy because I was working at Stirling, which meant my students were phenomenal, by the way, maybe because I used to let them away early so I could run down the corridor to another seminar room and become the master student. But yeah, that was, and I'm sure you'll enjoy your year doing that, because
Thank you. Thanks.
yeah, I'm sure you will. It's kind of a special place, Stirling.
Yeah.
One of my tutors was the new Macker for Scotland, Kathleen Jamie.
Oh, wow.
So I discovered a whole new genre of sort of narrative nonfiction, something I never thought I would want to write, and I ended up writing a lot of it.
Fabulous. All right. And so, so in a funny way, you started at Strathclyde and you wanted to write novels, and now you've gone back to short stories and poetry.
And I'm still writing. I'm about to start writing another novel.
Okay.
Or maybe a couple of novels. There might be a series in there.
Great.
But I'm doing that in a rather unusual way. It's through the University of the Highlands and Islands.
Okay.
And it's via a research master's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So because it's historical, another genre, it's based on the most northerly island in Britain called Unst in 1530.
Brilliant.
So that's my challenge. I like to be challenged. Ian Maxton will know that. He's nodding. I like a challenge. I think that's the academic in me, you know. I do like that.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you going to share with us tonight, Lesley? What of your many works, what are you going to share with us tonight?
Right, I'm going to show you something, right, because I went to the bookshelf to pick out some stuff. And I thought, all right, okay, be sensible. I want to, there's interest here in writing process. So I just want to mention something, that when I got to book 4 of a series, and it was urban fantasy, I had considered killing off one of the main characters. And I then decided, well, let one of the characters think the other one is dead and they are grieving. And to get into the process of writing about someone who really was distraught and grieving, I wrote a book of poetry from his point of view.
Oh, interesting.
And if this is how weird the whole thing is, this guy is actually 700 years old. Not a Viking. I keep saying, everyone says, was he a Viking? No. He was born slightly after that. But I'm going to read the poem. He's really leading an army at this point, and he decides he's going to just die. He's going to not survive a battle coming up. And this is what he writes. This is his last words, and because he's writing this poetry. The year is aging, like my grief. You walk in the colour of the land and sky. Leaves tremble their final song, but it is your hair that cascades in the breeze. A pair of lone green leaves, your eyes amidst the russet, searching. I too search for you, my love. I search for a path to follow you into your auburn world. The rage, it simmers like the kettle at the side of the campfire, comforting but dangerous to the unaware. Hiding in the core of my being, it waits, it smiles, it mocks, it spews thoughts that creep through my veins, reaching out, clenching muscles. An uncontrollable beast pulling on a tether. Tomorrow, the beast will be unleashed on the plain below. Tomorrow, it will guide my sword into the flesh of men. I will seal their guilt with my final intent. Tomorrow, my love, I will ignore Odin's call to Valhalla. I will feel your hands slip into mine in full anger, for you are surely with Freya. I have been lost in perdition. Now I come home. And the reason, I mean, I had to get into the mindset, and I have done this a number of times when I'm trying to really get to the soul of a character. I wander around in their head. I write from their point of view, something nothing to do with the novel, or I write poetry from their point of view. Okay. Sorry, I'm rattling on because I was going to say.
No, you're not rattling. I think
right.
It's a really interesting process to
It is an
that.
And it's kind of unique. But over the years, I have been asked to write about my experiences living in Ethiopia. I lived in Ethiopia in a war zone. I had been lied to about a job opportunity. So I arrived just months after the military leader, Mengistu, had been murdering everybody. They said the streets ran with blood. So there was a curfew. It was horrendous. And I never spoke about my experiences. Never. And then when people found out in the last, say, 10 years that I'd been there, still, you must write about it. And I found it incredibly difficult. And I had a couple of attempts, and I was chickening out. I knew I was. But I want to read a poem that is about that time, but it's not the total truth. And this is something as writers we can do. We can fool ourselves. There was a time in the capital, there was, if you've ever seen Strictly Ballroom, the film, where there's a little shack down at the railway, right? There actually was a little club that played the most amazing music down there. And it's something I used to love to do. You switched off from the horrors that were going on around you. And because it was next to the railway station, it was called Lagar, because the weird thing about Ethiopia is it's been invaded by so many people. There is different languages. In fact, English is probably the first language. Second is Italian. And then the third is probably the national or the regional language, Amharic. And then there's French in there, so that's why there's Lagar, right? So the station. So I thought that I would read you what I wrote. This is called Dancing at Lagar. Once the sun has fallen off the roof of the shed, once the iron horse has been led to bed, a beat starts up, primal, a call to the faithful. It paces footsteps across the sleeping rails to a place where rifles and colour are left outside, suspended in the darkness, in that other place where war and death stalks. Before the soldiers ride the streets searching for those who have not heeded the warning, Lagar keeps us safe, locked in her thrall, safe until curfew. Fingers bound together, black on white, my toe cuts a rut through the grit, a taut arc bends my hip to its groove across his body. Not even the jasmine breeze that breaches the open walls can separate, and on we move, synchronicity. River wash shirts tucked into jeans absorb the heat from her tin roof, paying back that stolen from the day. Our bodies pulse through her captives, sharing their joy at being alive, dancing at La Gare. Now, that was soft. That was really me not, thank you, Philip. That was really me not being totally truthful. And it took probably till my master's. And Liam, who is in charge of the master's there, said, you have to write your memoir. You have to start it. And I kicked back against it. I really was like, no, I can't do this. I've never spoken about it. And I made a tentative start. I have. The trouble is, when I write, people don't believe what I'm writing about, because they say that couldn't have happened. That's too horrific.
Right.
So it's because I was very young. I mean, I was barely 21. But if you want to read one of the stories, and this is a nicer story, that came out of my dissertation, and it was published in this international short story magazine, Postbox. And it's about coming across a nomad wedding in the middle of nowhere. And the father, who I reckon might have been only in his early 30s, asked me to marry him in the middle of nowhere at this amazing wedding. I was asked if I would marry him. He was serious, by the way. And I was tempted. I was actually tempted because he was rather hot. But anyway, so the short story is in this. It's actually in this. Sorry, I'm going to shut up for a few minutes, right, in case anybody wants to ask me anything.
Well, I mean, I'm full of questions. I'm going to let other people chip in, because otherwise I don't want to take all the air. But anybody got some questions for Lesley? I mean, you've shared with us so much. You've shared with us about your writing process, which is fascinating, but also so much. You've been really generous about your personal life and that honesty, you know, that we all struggle with, especially when we're writing about something that's personal, and it is hard. Right? It's really hard.
I think maybe we can come on to that, is why my collective of women writers is so powerful, is the honesty of the writing and the sharing of their experience when they do workshops or they do events. Yeah. We might be talking about that.
Yeah. Women with fierce words you're talking about there.
Yes, I have a collective of women writers who individually are astonishing and award-winning writers, and the collective is called Women with Fierce Words. It's
outstanding, really. Yeah, the quality of what's delivered from that. Thank you, Lesley. Thank you. Okay, anybody have a question for Lesley?
Well, I was quite interested, Lesley. You talked earlier about when you were writing your first novel, you listened to music blaring out. You've had such an eclectic array of writing styles over the years, different genres and just approach. So I'm just wondering how your personal sort of approach to writing and sitting down at the keyboard has evolved over time. Do you still listen to music? Does it depend on the type of work you're working on, book versus short story versus poetry, genre is different? Like,
I know this is going to really sound strange, but sometimes listening to music allows my brain to disconnect from what I'm writing. And it seems to go to a more instinctual stage. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. If I think too much about what I'm putting down, it becomes more of a process. If I can disconnect, it becomes more from, you know, a deeper place. And I seem to get better writing.
I think that's why I struggle with the quiet room, and I need to be around the world because it just feels too pressured, too much of a process. I've got to think. Whereas if there's noise around you, like you say, you can disconnect, just find a bit of flow and just lose yourself in the words rather than going in search of them.
Totally. I mean, but I think everybody has their own way of working. So I mean, all I just have to say is that works for me. I'm going to ask Ian, because Ian was at the workshop, and it was for your festival one weekend in Falkirk, when we had the guitarist, remember the classical guitarist, and I had asked you, could he be there to play while people were writing? And what, do you want to maybe just explain? I mean, there was an amazing moment with an autistic lad as well, who seemed to go to a very deep place. And for him, that he felt that was unusual.
Yeah, well, the guitarist, I remember his name as Nico G, but I actually noticed on Facebook a few days ago he's changed his name on Facebook, and I'm trying to remember what the hang it is. I think it's what might be Nicholas Guitarist or something with an E on the end. It's something like that. Anyway, lovely chap, beautiful finger picking guitar style, absolutely instrumental. There are no words. There were never any words. And I think that, well, I don't think I know, that was the really interesting thing about that, because well, I'm speaking for myself, I heard words, you know, there were none, but I heard them. So I just wrote down the words that I heard. And I understand, or that's the understanding I took, that other people were doing exactly the same. And I think some people, which is perhaps what you're referring to, Lesley, I think some people were hearing their own voice speaking the words in their head, but I felt I was hearing the words that somebody else may have written to the piece of music. They weren't necessarily like my own words, if that makes sense, even though I was writing them. But it was a fascinating thing to do, and it was just so calm and so peaceful and so, well, it was just beautiful. An overused word, of course, but it was just serenity. There was a serenity about the whole thing. And I do remember thinking at the outset, there's the be honest bit coming out now at long last, I do remember, because I do have a very, very healthy handle on cynicism at all times, you know, and I do remember thinking, oh, this is going to be a barrel of laughs, this will no, well, hopefully it's only about 5 minutes, it'll not seem too long. That was the kind of thoughts in my head at the time, you know. Oh, how wrong was I? It was lovely. In fact, you know, maybe that's something to revisit at some point. Yeah, anyway, shut up, Ian. But it was lovely, yeah. So, who was it? Lesley, when you were talking about music, and Matthew mentioned it earlier as well, before I sort of became unconnected and whatnot. There is something interesting about music, because I love music. I absolutely adore music, and my taste in music is very, very eclectic. So, you know, Marilyn Manson to Barbra Streisand and everything in between pretty much, you know. So I like a little bit of everything, really. And I find that the voice in the head, now, I'm not saying that in some kind of bizarre, quick, see a psychiatrist kind of way. The voice in the head that would be the voice that I would listen to if I was going to write something, you know, that voice. Oh, I'm getting photographed. Christ almighty, I'm talking to you, I've got a cat in my lap and I'm getting bloody photographed at the same time. You couldn't put money on this, you really couldn't. Honest to God, missing bloody teeth and everything, what am I like? Anyway, that's Leonard, by the way. You'll not believe me, but he's farting about there. See what I mean? See what my life.
Hi, Leonard.
Bloody put up with. Honest, I should get a bloody medal. I really should. Anyway, what was I saying? When I listen to music, sorry, I'm waffling. I'm not waffling. I've got a point here, I think. When I listen to music, I sometimes surprise myself when I hear that voice in my head, because the music that I'm listening to will affect, you know, what that voice is and what it's saying and how it's saying it. And that's really, I find that really, really interesting, you know. So you put on something sort of up tempo with a bit of attitude, and of course that's what comes spilling out of me. I love that. I love that.
I take my hat off to anybody who can write while music's playing. I can often feel like I want to connect with my character or whatever I'm writing about by listening to music before, but then it has to be off. But I can write on a bus, or on a train. You know, I can write with other things going on, but music, for whatever reason, I can't. And yet I do use it sometimes to connect with somebody or to take me into their mood. So by using a sad piece or a happy piece or a, you know, a punky piece or whatever, they are. So yeah, I mean, you writing to Eminem, I'm like, huh? How do you do that?
I know, and it was Green Mile as well. So it was really full on, and I love it. I mean, I love music like that, which is probably just really weird. But I'll also listen to classical. You're right, I think it depends. But sometimes it takes you off just totally in a different direction, and I love that as well.
Okay.
I love that.
Wonderful. Nicholas Gull music. Thank you, Ian. So I'd like us to finish maybe with one more piece from you, Lesley. If you have one more piece to share, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm not going to read the title, Thrawn. Right. I should maybe explain for the non-Scots. Thrawn is a Scots word, and it means really stubborn, kicks back against the norm. It's often used as a derogatory term for women. You know, oh, she's very thrawn, that one, right? You know, so I wanted to own this. So my new collection is very honest. It is very honest. But what I thought I would like to finish with is actually something that I wrote for my sister. My sister lived in Italy for 20 odd years. From a bit, she got married at 18. And I know, again, there's a big story against that as well. But anyway, she was going through, she had divorced the Italian husband, was in the process of divorcing the second husband. So she used to turn up in my garden, totally a wreck. And she would probably stay for about 5 minutes and then she'd disappear again. But this day she fell asleep in my garden. And I have lots of fruit trees and she was sitting under a plum tree. So rather than write the poem about her being amazing and, you know, really vivacious and everything, this is what I wrote for her. And it's called Mia sorella dorme, my sister sleeps. My sister sleeps in my garden, shaded by a plum tree, the same tree the old man told me he stole from. His story, 90 years in the remembering. My sister sleeps, escaping from a story she would not have chosen to write. Hers, 25 years in the forgetting. With each exhaled breath, words escape, words she would trap if awake. Malignant vapors that wreak havoc, draining her of the will to live. My sister sleeps, hummed into slumber by bees, beating their wings against a blue haze of lavender, releasing its minty sweetness. As the aroma bathes her, she is pulled further into a fairy land of rest, one she does not want to leave. Surrendering, other thoughts enter her dreams, dreams of when she is that girl again, running through a wood of lilac trees, laughing as the wind soaks us in blossoms, clusters bursting on her skin like tiny Parma violets. I know this as she smiles, when that same sweet scent drifts down from my own memorial tree to childhood. My sister sleeps, I, sentinel, protecting, wait for her to surface into deep, turbulent water, her life. Shh.
Oh, wow. the change in that was the journey you took us on. I mean, short in a way, but it was a long journey that she took us on.
I should
Thank you.
maybe mention, for those that don't know me, I'm also a performance poet. I've actually been twice in the Scottish finals. So I do a lot of performance poetry, and that ended up in various sort of events.
Thank you. Thank you. Matthew and Lesley, you've been amazingly generous. Thank you so much for everything you've shared. I will put this out on my YouTube channel, and I would encourage anybody else who's on here to maybe share. I'll also put it up on Facebook. So please do share it, because I think this has been a really rich evening, kind of a tapestry of your work, which is so different, and yet there's there's a lot in common, right? We've talked about honesty, we've talked about that process of writing. So yeah, just thank you. Matthew, where do we buy your book, just for the people who aren't going to be seeing the chat?
So you can go to beyondbook.co, beyondbook.co, and yeah, there's a free sample there, links to the book and links to me. If you've got any questions you'd like to personally ask me, just reach out over Facebook or email, whatever.
Brilliant, thank you. And Lesley, where do we buy your books?
If you check me out on Facebook or Twitter, but the latest collection is available from the publisher Dreich, and that's another Scottish word, which I'll have to spell for you, D-R-E-I-C-H. So you'll get it from there.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I'm going to wrap us all up now. Thank you very much for joining us, Philip, Anne, Ian and Molly, and look forward to seeing you all. Hopefully you'll come back and visit to hear some other writers doing Writers Read next month. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It was
So much for
wonderful,
having me.
Liza.
Thank you. Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.